Funding for the Maddy Report is made possible by grants from the Spencer family, Community Health System, Harris Ranch Resort, Producers Dairy, Valley Children's Healthcare, and The Wonderful Company. Additional support provided by from the Maddy Institute, the Public Policy Institute for the Valley's public universities. This is the Maddy Report with Executive Director of the Maddy Institute, Blake Zante.
Welcome to the Maddy Report. Today we're joined by California State Senator Shannon Grove, and we'll be covering several topics from Senator Grove's start in office, current legislation, and broader topics affecting California and the nation. Senator Grove, thanks again for joining us on the Maddy Report today. Really appreciate your time.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you, Blake, for having me.
Well, great. Something I love to ask every elected official that we have on the show, your background, your start in office before running for the state legislature. What made you decide to run initially for the state assembly and then continue your career in the state senate?
Kevin McCarthy. So I was a business owner. I still am, 33 years in this business, in this state, sometimes in spite of this state. I think every business owner can actually say that. And I was having a problem with workers' comp. And I went to my then assembly member, who was Kevin McCarthy, when he was the leadership in the assembly. And he helped me solve a problem. I got to go up to Sacramento and testify before a hearing committee with several other people from the district, Sean McNally from Grimway, and we worked on workers' comp together. And then a few weeks later, I found myself being invited to events and lunches, and I was at his head table, and I thought, that's kind of cool. And then a few weeks after that, I got a call from Mark Abernathy and Kevin, both, and said, you know, would you consider running for this position? Gene Fuller's going to run for the Senate. And I was basically like, no, thank you, but thank you for thinking of me, because my background is, you know, my life background is different than any other politician out there. I went to a continuation high school. I barely graduated high school. I served in the United States military. I'm actually the first female veteran that's ever served in the California State Legislature. And I started a business and grew it from the ground up, but I don't have a college degree. So all these things that I thought that you needed in order to be in elected office were things that I felt like would haunt me. And when you get into politics, they know everything. They know you stole milk money from Susie in kindergarten, right? They go back all the way back in your life. But anyways, we prayed and fasted over it, and here we are, you know, under the old rules 12 years later and doing good things for the district.
Now, talking about your district, you represent the 12th Senate District, which includes Fresno, Tulare, and Kern counties. It's a large geographic district. You're born and raised in the Valley. What does it mean to you that you now have the opportunity to represent these communities?
It's pretty incredible. You know, when you look at the 12th Senate District, we are the top 3 food-producing counties in the world. We're the #1 energy county district in the entire state. If allowed to get permits, we produce in this district 80% of the state's battery storage, 58% of the state's renewable energy, and out of 11 tons of cement, we produce 9.5 million tons of cement that is used all over the world, specifically like at SoFi Stadium or Los Angeles or on our freeways. It's a pretty incredible district to represent, and we have good, hardworking people.
Now, talking about those people, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican who's on this show, I think it's been universally stated that the Valley is often overlooked and underrepresented in both Sacramento and Washington. The communities you represent, you know, the key industries in your district, the challenges they face. Can you talk a little bit about them and, you know, why is it important for them to be represented in the state capitol?
It's very important, and I know we're going to talk a little bit about as being the vice chair of rules later in another segment, I think, but, you know, bringing those individuals that are governor's appointees that I get the opportunity to have serious discussions with, bringing them to the heartland of this state, the Central Valley, and letting them see different things, like a not the CEC vice chair, but the CPUC chair came and really wasn't aware of all of our, you know, wind production, energy production, and then they learned that. And then we get a little bit of different treatment, I guess. We just educate them on the heartland of the Central Valley because, you know, we have a project now that we've been working on since 2017 that would provide all the Californians with 6 cents a kilowatt energy for their PG&E bills instead of 41 cents, but it has to do with oil reservoirs. It's called geotest. It's like synthetic geothermal, and it heats up the water in a reservoir. It'd be transition jobs for the oil companies or oil people that have lost their jobs, employees, and it's been stuck in, you know, Sacramento in a policy policy situation with CalGEM since 2017. Well, who in California doesn't want 6 cents a kilowatt? That's a national lab that gave us that information, not the company itself. So we have a lot to offer. We have lithium mines. We have everything that we need. We have a brand new antimony mine that we've been trying to get access to, which would help us get off our some of these natural chemicals or minerals, I guess, not chemicals, that the president's trying to access right now, so that we have less dependence on foreign countries. We are not the enemy. We're the experts in a lot of our fields, and our people can help this state tremendously if given the chance.
Well, thank you, Senator Grove. We're going to talk more about those issues in a moment. We'll be right back with Senator Grove talking about some of the legislation she's advancing in the state legislature. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. In this segment, we're turning our attention to Senator Grove's current legislative agenda and some of the bills she's currently authoring. Senator, you've taken a unique approach to building some political support for some of the recent bills you've introduced. You partnered with several celebrities, including Paris Hilton and Jay Leno. Could you share an overview of your current legislative priorities and maybe some of the issues you're focused on right now?
Thanks. Yeah, it's funny that my Democrat colleagues can give me a bad time about how did you become the legislator for the stars. And it actually happened with our first major bill that we got out of the building, SB 14, making it a serious felony to sell children for sex in the state of California, because it wasn't. And we wanted it to be a strike offense. We haven't had a strike added to the books, I think, in over 20 years. And this would do that and increase penalties for those that engaged in this horrific act. And once we got that bill out of the building and to the governor's desk, we received a call from Paris Hilton, and she called us the champion of women and children. She wanted us to run a piece of legislation because of her background and what happened to her growing up and what she went through with these out-of-state facilities. I mean, they came and kidnapped her in the middle of the night and took her to a facility in Utah. And there's a Netflix series on it as well. And we had students outside of California that were in these facilities. And so we actually worked and got that piece of legislation passed. And then with Jay Leno, and what's funny about the two of these, Paris Hilton was fairly easy to move from place to place, because I think people would be like, it's Paris Hilton, and they would kind of look and take a photograph. But Jay Leno, I mean, it took us hours to move him. He's an incredible patriot. He's a good guy. In committee, I don't, how much you want to hear, but in committee, he really got beat up about, things about, the opposition said people would die if we allowed classic cars to have exemptions for smog checks, which is just not true. The way we wrote the bill, you have to have a secondary vehicle, it has to have special insurance, you have to keep it in a locked garage, all these things to be able to get this bill passed. And he was looking at me like, this is crazy. And then another Democrat, that was from a Democrat, and another Democrat, not that I'm trying to be partisan, said, I just have one request, Mr. Leno. And he goes, okay, so he's nervous. Can you not use anything of what just happened in any of your comedy acts? And he goes, I don't think they'd ever believe me. So it was fun and engaging, and he's an incredible individual, and we're running the bill again next year.
That's really unique and definitely an interesting strategy to build that support for some of the bills you worked on, and great stories as well. You've also had a couple of other bills that were recently signed by Governor Newsom. One of them in particular, SB 237, certifying the Kern County Environmental Impact Report to streamline oil permitting in Kern County. This is sort of a shift. I think we've seen, maybe some criticism in the past from the governor on oil permitting, but you were able to work across the aisle to get this through. Maybe could you explain this legislation and the process for how that bill came to be?
So about, I guess 9 months ago, I got a phone call and it says, you've been screaming from the rooftops that we're going to end up with $10 a gallon gas and the infrastructure is going to fail. And I think we're at that point, and will you help us? But you can't be on the bill, which is fine. They wanted to give it their target Democrats and things like that. And I was like, it doesn't matter who gets the credit for it, let's just get it done. So we worked on that, worked with the CEC vice chair, Sivagunda. The governor could not have picked a better person to do a deep dive on the oil industry. And what they realized is that Kern County's EIR actually produces California compliant oil. It has 88 mitigation measures. We are net carbon increase. So every well that we put in the ground does not increase carbon any way, shape, or form. We've permitted more solar, more clean air buses with using those resources that are mitigated based on a well going in the ground. And there was a huge negotiation. There was, days that I thought it was going to die. We weren't going to get it through. There were three pieces: the production piece, the transportation piece through the fuel pipelines to make sure the pipelines were sustainable, and then the refinery piece. At the end of the day, the governor came through and kept his word on the permit piece for Kern County compliant, California compliant oil. We do it better than anyone else. People around the state were really upset that it was only going to affect Kern County, and I said, where's your EIR? Let's start there. Where's your environmental impact report that's going to make sure that you honor setbacks, that water basins are protected? All of those things that we need to work together on and make sure that we, like I said, California compliant oil. And the refinery piece did not get done, which was really sad because California went to Valero after Valero had given notice and said, we're out. And they said, what can we do? And nothing, we're leaving. There was a conversation. And then it was, after the negotiation piece, it ended up being, you do these regulatory issues and pay half of what's coming up on this turnaround, which is about, $440 million, 900 and something total. So it was roughly half. And at the end of the session last year, we got the permitting, but politics dictated policy. And I fear that with Valero leaving, the price at the pump and the market will dictate policy this next year for us to make sure that we stabilize the fuel price for all Californians.
Thank you, Senator Grove. We're going to take another quick break, and we'll be right back after this. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back to the Maddy Report. We'll now continue our conversation with Senator Grove, taking a closer look at her work in the Capitol and within her district. Senator, you currently serve on several committees, and you mentioned this earlier, including being the vice chair of the Rules Committee. Could you explain, what are the committees that you serve on, and then also what does that entail, serving as vice chair of Rules?
So I serve on several committees. I serve on the vice chair of Rules. I'm the vice chair of Veterans Affairs, being the first female veteran ever elected to the state office or the state capitol. I serve on energy. I serve on natural resources. I serve on several committees, health. And I think each one of them gives us an opportunity to have a voice for the Valley. Obviously, the vice chair of Rules, I get to have all access to governor's appointees, agency heads, agency secretaries. It was very instrumental in getting us the resources that we needed for the Central Valley for roads and infrastructure, for $174 million coming over Highway 58. So all of those relationships helped us get resources for highway improvement projects. Serving on the Health Committee along with Rules with the, Department of Public Health confirmation hearings, we were able to get a lot of resources for our financially distressed hospitals after Madera closed. It put pressure on Fresno. But we really need to fix that because in the medical industry, it's just a pathway to bankruptcy, especially if you have a high Medi-Cal population because your rates are reimbursed so low. But we were able to fix things like that and address issues. Obviously, Veterans Affairs, fighting for veterans' rights, veterans' benefits, things like that. On the natural resources and water was helpful, and so was energy regarding geotests that I mentioned earlier with 6 cents a kilowatt energy that could be dispatched to the grid at 1,000 hours of energy storage with no exposure of fire. It's the new technology that's out there. It's held up by an agency that doesn't understand the process, and it has a little bit of enhanced oil recovery added to it because once you pull the water out, the oil will come out and it'll go back down in the ground, and they don't want you to be able to sell the oil. That's a silly reason why not to get 6 cents a kilowatt hour for a price. I'm on budget. There's a lot of committees that we serve on, and each one of them brings something unique that we can do for the Central Valley. Like I said, healthcare for us in the Central Valley is vitally important, transportation infrastructure and natural resources, and and then vice chair of Rules has been the most impactful, I think, for all of us.
Well, I want to shift gears a little bit. Unfortunately, we only have a couple minutes to cover this topic, but it's something you've been very passionate about, combating human trafficking, especially as it pertains to minors. Something you've been working on for several years in your time in office. Last year you worked on SB 1414. This year SCR 10. recognizing January as National Human Trafficking Awareness Month. And then also you worked on AB 379 with Assemblymember Maggie Krell. Talk to us about, that process, maybe with the bill that you just worked on this year. What was that like, and what did that bill specifically address?
As I was coming to the end of my term this next year, I'm running for State Board of Equalization, but as I'm coming to the end of the Senate term, who do you pass that on to? We were able to get the serious felony for individuals that sell children for sex. And then the survivors came back to us and said, the buyers, once they paid for us, it was like game on, like it was horrible. They owned us for that hour or whatever it was. And so when we looked at that piece of legislation, it was only 2 days in jail and a fine. Well, that's just long enough to explain to your wife where you've been. So we made it 1 year in prison, or when we're in jail. Not prison, we tried prison, but 1 year in jail and a fine. And then we were really struggling, and they wanted us to do something else. And it's the hardest thing I've ever worked on. And enter Maggie Krell, a Democrat. We're totally opposites on policy, but she was somebody who worked for the Department of Justice. She took down Backpage, and I'm like, let's talk to her and give her this mantle to carry. And she took it up, and they took it away from her, and there was a whole process and a battle and all of that. At the end of the day, they did give it to a different author. They took it from Maggie, Assemblymember Krell. But the bottom line is that neither one of us cared who was the author. Let's just get it done and protect kids in the state.
Well, certainly important work, and not enough time to cover all of the work that you've done on that issue. So thank you, Senator Grove. We're going to take another quick break, and then we'll wrap up our conversation. This is the Maddy Report. Welcome back. Senator, thanks again for joining us on the Maddy Report today. Before you go, I'd like to turn what lies ahead for you in the legislature. You're in your final term. California's budget seems to be in a precarious position. This is something that independent, nonpartisan agencies have reported on, the Legislative Analyst's Office and others as well. Especially with the threat of some federal cuts that could be on the horizon. Taking out the partisan politics of it, what does the landscape look like for next year's budget?
I think we're going to be in a severe deficit, worse than we were this last year. We have a problem because we have a president, and he's not the problem, but the president is holding California accountable, like, for instance, high-speed rail. It hadn't met the requirements, so we went down to Secretary Duffy's press conference, and they pulled back billions of dollars from the high-speed rail that the governor had to backfill. It's not a transportation project anymore. It's a jobs project. It's not going to be built in our lifetime. They're changing them, the direction of it and the plans of it. It's almost like every day that it changes. The other thing is that we as the state of California issues California CDL's Class A licenses to individuals who can't read English or speak English, and it's caused, going across state lines, it's caused severe accidents have come to light, and so there's another $160 million that could be possibly held back from California because we're not complying with federal law on California driver's licenses. We're issuing them to undocumenteds. So we do have a situation where there are going to be cuts, and obviously with the shutdown, and I applaud Congress and Mike Johnson for getting that bill passed, and it's in the Senate, and now the Senate needs to do their job and pass it and send it back in a clean resolution, a clean CR, and just extend the government opening. They've voted on that several times in the past, but we are going to be in a deficit. We have lost several businesses have left the state. Individuals with high earnings have left the state. I had a donor from the Bay Area leave the state. I had big donors from Bakersfield leave the state. One of them slid a Wyoming driver's license across to me. I think he told me he paid $4 million in taxes. That's in taxes. One person, $4 million in taxes. And he just doesn't, he's not going to do it anymore and fight for his business. And so we are losing revenue as fast as we are losing people. And we are going to face a very tough budget deficit next year.
Well, as you near the end of your term in the legislature, let's look, sort of reflect back a little bit. What lessons have you learned from your time in office?
So I think whether you're a Democrat or Republican, we all face some of the same issues. It's a very diverse state, and so what was good for me is, it's interesting. Take Scott Wiener. You would never think that we would have anything in common, but he gave me the vote I needed to get the human trafficking bill out of committee because Senator Skinner was voting against it. And it was called the tweet of the day because he's W, so his vote was last, and he voted aye, and I ran up and gave him a hug, and they took a photograph, and it became the tweet of the day. And then I invited him down to the district, and he didn't come, but I showed him a lot of photographs of the Central Valley. And then I went to San Francisco, and of course, when I drive a lot, I'll take the F-350 or the F-250. It's safer, it's bigger if an accident happens. There's no place to park that truck. You see parents bringing students, their kids to work on a bicycle with like a piece of wood on the back, and they're all 3 or 4 stacked on the back. There's these driverless cars driving you everywhere. They're different worlds, and we need to respect the diversity of the state, and I think that's a big thing. And I also learned a lot that, unbalanced government is not good government, and the best kind of government you can have is balanced government.
Well, maybe on that note, you've been able to get your Democratic colleagues and the governor to support multiple pieces of legislation that you've worked on and other issues as well. What does this process of bipartisan coalition building really look like as a member of the super minority? And is there still hope for bipartisanship and collegiality in California?
So absolutely, and I think it's because, I keep my word when I tell them I'm going to do something, I do it. Go back to SB 14, it got killed by the Democrats in the public safety. It got out of the Senate unanimously, got to the Assembly, and public safety killed it. And we were mortified. And the next morning I'm doing a tour and look down, it's Gavin calling, says Gavin Newsom, Governor Newsom. I think it's Gavin Newsom. And I'm like, well, probably should take this. And I said, good morning. And he said, I'm upset about what happened. And I said, frankly, I'm really upset about what happened. And he said, permission to engage. And absolutely engage away. And the first partner, Jennifer, she was just incredible. She did a tour down in Los Angeles. She got really involved. She brought on people that were opposed to the bill, that wanted restorative justice and all these things on the far, far left. And she brought them to the middle, and I brought my people to the middle. And we figured out that working together on bills in compromise makes the best legislation. And it really does. It doesn't work when they cram things down our throat that don't, that negatively impact all of Californians, but specifically the Central Valley. And it probably wouldn't work if we had 100% super majority, because maybe things wouldn't get taken care of that, a lot of the Democrat policies take care of. I think balanced government is best government, and I think you treat your colleagues with decency and respect, and you build relationships.
Well, Senator Grove, thank you so much for your time on the Maddy Report today. Really appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you, Blake, for inviting me.
Thank you. And thank you for tuning into the Maddy Report. To learn more about the Maddy Institute, visit themaddyinstitute.org. The views expressed in the Maddy Report are those of the individuals participating in the program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Maddy Institute. If you'd like to share your thoughts about today's episode of the Maddy Report, please visit our website at maddyinstitute.com.